Alan Keating is known for loose, aggressive, splashy, battly poker. He is not afraid to get in there and run big bluffs. But every once in a while, he ends up with a really, really good hand. And when that's the case, his opponent is doomed.
Here we go. Jacks against King Queen. And we have a cooler. I fear for Alan Keating's stack here. Look at this. Boat over boat. I fear no more. 571K pot.
Nicely done, Stanley. Nicely done. Gotta get the ship moving. Buddy, I can't stack you when you're away from the table.
Straddle.
That's true.
That's true. I have to give you a chance to stack me, right? Whew. Oh, you can.
No.
Interesting angle there.
You play better.
We're peeping Charles Hull cards.
How much?
8.
28.
28.
Here we go.
First 10 back.
That's right.
A very fair fight. Jacks against King Queen. Brandon in position with the jacks. 60,000 and change in the middle.
They were playing 500, 1,000 with a $2,000 straddle and a $2,000 ante on Hustler Casino Live. This is a big game. It folds around to Brandon Steven, who's been around poker forever. He raises it up in the hijack with pocket jacks to $8,000. You may say, why so big? It's only 500 to 1,000. Well, there's a straddle, so the big blind is now 2,000, so he's making it 8 times the big blind, but only 4 times the straddle, which is the new, call it big blind. And then there's an ante in play, so you should raise even a little bit bigger. Also, they're super duper deep stacked, so you want to raise a little bit bigger. Also, players in this game don't really like to fold, so you might as well raise bigger with your best hands and just get full value. Brandon does that. He makes it 8,000 over onto Alan Keating in the big blind, which is now effectively the middle blind. He makes it 28,000 with the king queen offsuit. This is a perfectly fine play. He could also call, but free betting is quite nice. Brandon, in position with his jacks, has a very easy call. If he re-raises to, let's say, 70,000, and then gets re-raised, well, now all of a sudden his jacks are going to shrivel up substantially, and Alan Keating is the type of player who just might put in the re-raise with a bluff. And you're not trying to get in $600,000 with only pocket jacks preflop. When you're playing very deep stacked, the stack-off threshold preflop becomes quite high. You need something like aces or maybe kings to get in tons and tons of money. If your opponent's loose, aggressive, and crazy, maybe you can extend down to queens or ace-king. But in general, in position, you want to call and control the size of the pot, which is exactly what Brandon does. Let's see what it brings.
And we have a cooler. Top 2 against bottom set. I fear for Alan Keating's stack here.
Sorry.
Flop comes king, queen, jack. No flush draw. Alan has top 2 pair. Brandon has a set. However, this is a situation where a set is actually about as bad as it could possibly be because he loses to ace 10, which Alan could certainly 3-bet, 10-9, both suited and unsuited, as well as pocket kings and pocket queens. So you have to be a little bit careful. Alan goes for a 20,000 bet, thinking he has the best hand the vast majority of the time, and then Brandon just calls. This may look like somewhat passive play, but you have to, again, remember, when you're playing very, very deep stacked, you need a really, really good hand to want to play a humongous pot. Now, the only reason Brandon should perhaps raise this is because Alan does use a somewhat small flop bet size of a third pot. If Alan bet bigger, like let's say 80% pot, then you would definitely call. But this is a situation where because I do think Alan's going to have kings and queens in his range a lot, as well as ace 10 and 10-9, a set's not as good as it may seem. The only downside to calling is that you will let a few sporadic hands get there, like any hand containing an ace or a 10. But when that's the case, there's going to be 4 straight on the board, and you can be very, very cautious on the turn in the river. So I like this call by Brandon. It also allows Alan to stay in with whatever bluffs he does have in his range. That's very important to consider, right? If your opponent is someone who will continue bluffing on the turn with a random ace or a 10, you really, really, really do not want to blow them out of the pot. In this situation, once Alan bets 20, if Brandon makes it 70 and Alan has just an ace or just a 10, he's going to fold. And the pot's going to be over, and Brandon's going to win a small pot. He's not trying to win a small pot. He's trying to win all of Alan's $622,000. And you do that by calling. Let's go to the turn.
That's the flop, and Brandon just calls with bottom set. And look at this. Boat over boat. I fear no more. Keating is going to win a huge one.
Turn is the queen of clubs. Alan goes for a $55,000 bet into the $110,000 pot. And I think this is actually a bit of a misstep because if you consider the range that Brandon's going to call the flop with, it's going to be a hand containing a king, which is probably not going to fold, a queen, which is probably not going to fold, a jack, but if it's a jack, it's going to come with an ace or 10 or 9 a lot of the time, or a backdoor flush draw like ace X of hearts, clubs, or diamonds. And the vast majority of that range is going to call any reasonable turn bet. And at this point, Alan really wants to bet on the larger side so he can play for all of the money. Now, I realize Alan's exact hand, king, queen, is one that has a tough time getting called because it completely blocks Brandon's from having a king or a queen, right? There's just not a lot of them remaining in the deck. But this is a situation I do think you want to bet big with this stack depth because you really want to be able to bet 100 on the turn and then all of it on the river. If you go 55 on the turn and get called, the pot's going to be 200 and you're going to have 547 remaining. That is a lot. When you take a very polarized line of betting the flop and then continuing to bet the turn, you get to use big sizes because you either have a really good hand or nothing. And like right here, if Alan did have a hand like ace X, say he did have ace X of spades and decided to continue betting, he's going to want to use a large size to really apply pressure to a king or a jack, right? So for that reason, this is a spot where I think he wants to keep betting, but he wants to bet much bigger. He goes for 55,000. Let's see what Brandon does with his boat.
Brandon just calling down. Flop bottom set, turn to boat.
Brandon again, just calls. And I love this just call because, again, if Alan has a random bluff like ace X or 10X, you really want to keep him in the pot because he has 0% equity. And on top of that, if you happen to be beat by pocket kings or pocket queens or king queen or king jack, not king jack, queen jack, you have almost no equity. So in that situation, you want to keep the pot as small as possible. So all of that leads Brandon to want to play this hand slowly. Just call. So many players in Brandon's shoes would have blundered this hand. They would have raised on the turn thinking, I have the best hand and I want to play for all the money. But no. This is a dangerous spot where on top of that, you want to keep Alan in with all the bluffs. So Brandon very correctly just calls, even though he only has 3% equity. Let's go to the river.
Has not put in a raise. Brick on the river that completes the backdoor flush draw. If I know Alan Keating, he's going to bet close to pot here.
The river is the 3 of clubs, which is actually a pretty good card for Alan because if Brandon happened to have a flush, he's now going to call any bet. And of course, if Brandon did have ace X of clubs, he's going to call the flop, he's going to call the turn, he's going to make a flush on the river and not fold. The pot's 211,000. Alan has 547. And Alan is in a nasty spot because he would love to bet gigantic here. However, the problem is he has 2.5 times the size of the pot remaining in his stack. Notice, if the pot had an extra $100,000 in it, well now Alan would have, call it 500, and the pot would have 300. So now Alan would only be shoving for, call it 1.6x pot, which is somewhat reasonable. Shoving for 2.5x pot is a whole lot more, and you're going to have a hard time getting called by a whole lot of worse hands. So I think if Alan would have just simply bet bigger on the turn, that would have led to him being able to shove the river. Alan does go big, 180, but I think in this situation, again, because Brandon probably has a king, which is going to fold at most reasonable bets, a queen, which is never going to fold, a straight, which is never going to fold, or a flush, which is never going to fold, I think Alan does want to bet big. I would bet a little bit more than the size of the pot here. Maybe even all in. All in feels greedy. Maybe your opponent will start folding out some queens. But in this situation, since Alan blocks the queen, Brandon's more likely to have a straight or a flush, right? So for that reason, I think I would go very, very big. And if I thought Brandon thought I was insane, as you know, a lot of people think Alan Keating is insane. You've seen him play. That's a really good reason to go for all of it. He goes 180 though. Let's see if Brandon... Well, he's not going to fold. Let's see if Brandon blunders all of his money. What I want to know, let's be serious before we see what Brandon does. Would you have blundered all your money here? Be honest. Let me know in the comment section down below. When you're down there, click the notification bell. Click the subscribe button. Would you have raised on the flop or the turn or the river? If you would have got stacked. Let's see if Brandon gets stacked.
And he gets snapped off.
Wow, how sick is that?
Wow.
We'll see what he bet. Just like, yeah, he bet 180. Got snapped off. 571K pot being pushed over to the 3 seat. Just a brutal cooler. And now Brandon
See that hand?
is down a little bit, and Keating's only down a little bit.
Sick from Brandon to just call.
He had 2 pair, he had a set.
Brandon very correctly understands the concept of stack off threshold. When you're playing very, very deep, you need a really, really good hand to put the money in. And in this situation, if Brandon goes all in, what's he going to get called by? First things first, it looks really, 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 really strong, right? If you think you're going to get called by all the flushes and perhaps any queen and any straight, then shoving, I think, starts to make some sense. However, Alan might find a big fold with a queen for sure. He might find a big fold with a straight, given Brandon could easily have a flush. So I think raising is marginal on the river. I think it's at least kind of reasonable given the backdoor flush came in, because that's one more hand that can call your shove that you beat. But I think playing defensive is very often the right strategy in situations like this. Brandon does play defensive, and he saves a large chunk of his stack, where I think a lot of people would have gone broke.